Lachlan Kennedy just did something no Australian man has done in 64 years, and he did it in the pouring rain. In a 100-meter final most people didn't even know was happening. Let's talk about how a 22-year-old rugby kid from Brisbane just blew up Australian sprinting history in one night. Start here. Lachlan Kennedy was born on November 4, 2003, in Brisbane, Queensland. He went to St. Joseph's College, Gregory Terrace, one of the most rugby-obsessed schools in the country, and before he ever touched a track spike, he was good enough to represent Australia at junior international level in rugby union. Speed was always his weapon, he just wasn't using it on a track yet. Then he walked away from rugby completely and put everything into sprinting. And the results came fast. In 2022, at just 18 years old, he joined Australia's under-24 4x100 relay squad and helped break a 12-year-old national record, running 39.30 seconds. That same year he raced at the World Athletics Under-20 Championships in Cali, Colombia. 2 years later, in 2024, he was standing on the track at the Paris Olympics as a real contributor to Australia's 4x100 relay team, which set a new Oceania record of 38.12 seconds. A junior rugby player turned Olympian in 2 years. Then 2025 happened, and it turned into his real proving ground. In January, in Canberra, he ran the 60 meters in 6.43 seconds, smashing the Australian and Oceania record. 2 months later, he took that form to the World Athletics Indoor Championships in Nanjing, China, and walked away with a silver medal in the 60 meters, finishing just 0.01 seconds behind winner Jeremiah Azu of Great Britain. Then, in March 2025, at the Maury Plant meet in Melbourne, in front of a sold-out crowd of 10,000 people, he beat the most hyped teenager in Australian sprinting, Gout, running 20.26 to Gout's 20:30 in the 200 meters. 2 months after that, at the Kip Keino Classic in Nairobi, he ran 9.98 seconds in the 100 meters, becoming only the second Australian in history to legally break 10 seconds, after the legendary Patrick Johnson, who did it back in 2003 in Japan. It looked like nothing could stop him. Then his body stopped him. Kennedy had been carrying a stress fracture in his back since June 2025, and it forced him out of the 2025 World Athletics Championships in Tokyo. His manager confirmed he simply couldn't train through it, that it was too risky to push a 21-year-old with his whole career ahead of him. Kennedy posted about it himself, saying he was heartbroken to miss Tokyo, but he'd use the time to heal and come back stronger. And for months, he did just that quietly. No hype, no drama. He won at the Hobart Track Classic in early 2026, then went back to the Maury Plant meet in Melbourne and beat Gout again, this time running 10.03 in the 100 menace. Then came Sydney Olympic Park, April 10, 2026. In his heat, he ran 9.96 seconds, becoming the first Australian man ever to break 10 seconds on home soil legally. 24 hours later, in the final, he did it again, another 9.96, beating Rohan Browning, who ran 10.19, and Joshua Azapardi, who ran 10.16 and claimed his first Australian national title. But none of that prepared anyone for what happened in Glasgow. July 28, 2026. The Commonwealth Games, Scotstoun Stadium. Rain absolutely hammering the track, puddles sitting in the lanes, a swirling headwind that should have killed any chance of a fast time. Kennedy had already put the field on notice hours earlier, running 9.94 seconds in the semi-final. Then the final lined up Cameroon's Emmanuel Esame, a 32-year-old late bloomer who only picked up sprinting 8 years earlier, Nigeria's Kanyansola Ajayi, a man who'd already beaten the reigning world champion twice that season, and Wales's Jeremiah Azu, the same man who'd beaten Kennedy for gold at the World Indoors in Nanjing. The gun cracked. Esame got out first with his trademark explosive start. Kennedy built through the middle the way he always does, and by 60 meters it was Esame, Kennedy, and Ajayi, locked together, soaking wet, sprinting for a medal in conditions that should have made this impossible. Kennedy dipped hard at the line. It wasn't enough to catch Esame, who crossed in 9.83 seconds, smashing a Commonwealth Games record that had stood for 28 years. But Kennedy crossed in 9.85 seconds for silver, holding off Ajayi by the barest of margins. That 9.85 is the number that matters. It shattered Patrick Johnson's Australian national record of 9.93 seconds, a mark that had survived 23 years since 2003, a record that had literally stood since before Kennedy was even born. Johnson himself sent Kennedy a message afterward, telling him he'd etched his name into Australian sporting history. And this wasn't just a personal milestone. Kennedy became the first Australian man to win a Commonwealth Games 100 meters of medal since 1962, when Michael Cleary took bronze. 64 years gone. in the rain on a Tuesday night in Scotland. And he wasn't even the only Australian making history that night. Eddie Nketiah ran 10.03 in the semi-final and 10.06 in the final for 6th, the first time in 44 years two Australians had made the same Commonwealth 100 meters final. Minutes later, 21-year-old Tori Lewis ran 10.99 seconds to become the first Australian woman ever to break 11 seconds, taking bronze behind New Zealand's Zoe Hobbs, who won gold in 10.93, and England's Amy Hunt, who took silver in 10.98. Two Australians, two national records, two medals, same stadium, same storm, same night. Kennedy walked away calling it one of the proudest moments of his career, and with times like 9.85 now on his resume, he's not just chasing gout anymore, he's chasing Olympic medals in Los Angeles 2028, with Brisbane 2032 waiting right behind it. From a rugby jersey to the fastest Australian who has ever lived, that's the story of Lachlan Kennedy, and it's only just getting started. Quincy Wilson just ran a time that made the entire track world stop scrolling. 17 years old, still attending high school, and he just clocked 44.10 seconds in the 400 meters, a number that doesn't belong in a high school race. Not even close. This happened on July 12, 2025, at the Ed Murphy Classic in Memphis, Tennessee. Wilson stepped into lane 5. In lane 6 stood Stephen Gardner, the reigning Olympic 400-meter champion from the Bahamas. Most teenagers would feel the weight of that lane assignment before the gun even fired. Wilson didn't blink. But here's what makes this race so wild: it almost didn't look like it was coming. Earlier in 2025, Wilson's season best sat at a modest 45.27. In May, he lost a high-profile showdown to fellow high schooler Jaden Horton Mims, who ran 44.24 while Wilson trailed behind. Fans started wondering if the Olympic hype train had finally hit a wall. His coach, Joe Lee, kept repeating the same message through it all: stay on the process, trust the work. Then, Memphis happened. From the gun, Wilson exploded out of the blocks like he had something to prove. By the first turn, he had already erased the stagger on Gardner, an Olympic gold medalist, and was running shoulder to shoulder with him. Down the backstretch, Wilson looked smooth, relaxed, almost bored, despite a pace that should have broken him. Gardner eventually pulled up before the finish, likely dealing with an injury. Bryce Deadman, Wilson's own Olympic relay teammate, tried to close the gap from lane 3. He couldn't. In the final 50 meters, the part of the race where most 400-meter runners are fighting just to survive, Wilson found another gear. He pulled away. He crossed the line in 44.10 seconds, 0.3 of a second clear of Deadman's 44.39. In sprinting, that gap is enormous. Here's where the number actually lands in history. 44,010 made Wilson the 4th fastest man in the entire world in 2025, not 4th among teenagers, 4th on the planet. It tied the personal best of Matthew Hudson Smith, the man who won Olympic silver in Paris. Wilson's previous personal best was 44.20, set exactly 51 weeks earlier in Gainesville, Florida, a time that already made him the fastest high schooler in history. Now he owns 6 of the 10 fastest 400-meter times ever recorded by an under-18 athlete. 6 out of 10. One athlete. On the under-20 all-time list, only one name sits above him: Steve Lewis, who ran 43.87 to win Olympic gold at the 1988 Seoul Olympics at age 19. That record has survived for almost 4 decades. Wilson is now just 0.23 seconds away from touching it as a high schooler who hasn't even started college yet. And this is a kid who was already an Olympic gold medalist before any of this. At 16, Wilson became the youngest male track and field athlete in U.S. history to make an Olympic team, running the opening leg of the 4x400 relay heats in Paris. Team USA carried it home to gold, and because he ran the heat, the medal was his too, making him the youngest Olympic champion in the sport's history. His family had already made the sacrifice years earlier, relocating from Chesapeake, Virginia to Gaithersburg, Maryland, just so he could train at Bullis School under Coach Joe Lee. What happens next is where this gets dangerous for the rest of the field. In 3 weeks, Wilson lines up at the USA Track and Field Championships in Eugene, Oregon, finish in the top 3, and he punches a ticket to the World Championships in Tokyo this September as a senior-level competitor. While still in high school, the entry list is loaded. Caleb McRae has run 43.91 this year. Ja'Cory Patterson has run 43.98. Chris Bailey, the reigning world indoor champion, has clocked 44.15. Vernon Norwood owns a personal best that exactly matches Wilson's, 44,010. Deadman, the man Wilson just beat in Memphis, has a career best of 44.22. Every single one of them is a grown professional who has trained full-time for years. Wilson is doing this between class periods. Joe Lee built this moment on purpose, deliberately keeping Wilson's racing schedule light early in the season so he'd peak exactly when it mattered. mattered. The mental side of this story might be even more impressive than the physical one. After the loss to Horton Mims in May, Wilson didn't spiral. He used it as fuel. He's also carrying a level of attention most teenagers never face. Nearly 400,000 Instagram followers and a shoe deal with New Balance, and he's said publicly that fame brings both the good and the bad, but that's part of what shapes who he is. The road ahead points straight to the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics, where Wilson will be 21 and entering his physical prime, racing on home soil.
Most people saw the gold medal. Most people saw the records. But nobody told you what actually happened behind the scenes. Nobody told you about the family that gave everything up. Nobody told you about the race that almost broke him. And nobody told you about the one stat that proves Quincy Wilson is not just the greatest high school track athlete alive right now. He might be the greatest who ever lived. By the time this is over, that medal is going to mean something completely different to you. Quincy Wilson was born on January 8, 2008, in Chesapeake, Virginia. He started running at 8 years old. Not because some coach recruited him. Not because his parents pushed him. He just ran. And from the very first race, something was different. By the time he was 14, he broke Obea Moore's 30-year-old under-14 national record in the 400 meters. A record that had survived for 3 decades fell to a kid who was still in middle school. That's when the people who really watch this sport started paying attention. But here's the part that never makes the highlight reels. His parents, Monique and Roy Wilson, made a decision that most families would never even consider. They packed up their lives and moved the entire family from Chesapeake, Virginia to Gaithersburg, Maryland. Not for a job, not for a house, but so their son could attend Bullis School in Potomac, Maryland. A private prep school with one of the most elite athletics programs in the country. His cousin Shania Hall had already graduated from Bullis in 2020 and went on to run track at the University of Oregon. Speed runs in this family. But the sacrifice his parents made to put him in that environment? That is the foundation everything else is built on. His freshman year 2023, he walked into the New Balance Indoor Nationals at 15 years old and beat a field full of juniors and seniors by more than half a second, winning in 46.67. Commentators couldn't believe what they were watching. Then his sophomore year, he went back and broke the indoor national record running 45.76 at 16 years old. But that was just the warm-up. June 2024, the U.S. Olympic trials in Indianapolis. The best 400-meter runners in the entire country. All professionals. All adults who had spent years building to this moment. Quincy Wilson lines up and runs 44.66 in the preliminaries. A 42-year-old high school record, gone. Just like that. 2 days later in the semifinals, he breaks his own record again, running 44.59. In the final, he finishes 6th overall with 44.94. 6th among the best quarter-milers in the United States, and he was still a sophomore in high school. He didn't make the individual 400-meter Olympic team that day. But he was added to the 4x400 relay pool, making him the youngest American male track and field Olympian in history at 16 years old. Then, 1 month later, July 19, 2024, at the Holloway Pro Classic in Gainesville, Florida, he lines up next to Bryce Deadman, a 27-year-old professional who had just made the Olympic team himself. They go neck and neck the entire race. Wilson crosses in 44.20. Deadman crosses in 44.23. A high school kid just beat a professional Olympic athlete by 0.03 of a second and set the under-18 world record for the 3rd time in 60 days. Paris 2024, the biggest stage on Earth. Wilson runs the opening leg of the 4x400 relay heat, splits 47.27, and hands off in 7th place. The coaches make the call. He doesn't run the final. Christopher Bailey, Vernon Norwood, Bryce Deadman, and Rai Benjamin take it from there and win gold in a new Olympic record of 2:54.43, just 0.14 seconds off the world record. Because Wilson ran the heat, he gets the medal too. At 16 years old, he becomes the youngest track and field athlete to win Olympic gold. But standing on that podium, knowing he didn't run the final, he used that as fuel. July 2025, Memphis, Tennessee. The Ed Murphy Classic. He lines up against Stephen Gardner, the 2021 Olympic 400-meter champion from the Bahamas, a high school kid against the reigning Olympic gold medalist. Wilson pulls away from Gardner in the final stretch and crosses the line in 44.10 seconds. The crowd goes completely silent before it erupts. That time made him the fourth fastest person in the entire world in 2025. Not fourth among teenagers, fourth overall. Only 29 athletes in the entire history of the sport have ever broken 44 seconds. He is 0.23 seconds away from joining that list while still in high school. 2026 arrived, and he wasn't done. At the New Balance Indoor Nationals, he went for his fourth straight national title, something almost no athlete has ever done in any sport. Jaden Delian pushed him all the way to the line. Wilson won by 0.01 seconds, running 45.37 and breaking his own national record in the most dramatic way possible. Then at the VA Showcase, he ran the 500 meters in 1:05.56, the second fastest high school time ever run in that event, ranking him 11th in the world all time. He is now committed to the University of Maryland, but make no mistake, the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics is the real target. Steve Lewis ran 43.87 at the 1988 Seoul Olympics at age 19. That is the under-20 world record. It has stood for 37 years. Quincy Wilson is 18, and he already has a 44.10. His improvement every single year has been so consistent that a sub-44 from a high schooler, something that has never happened in the entire history of track and field, is now a real conversation. That gold medal in Paris, it was just the beginning.